workshops, and maybe something that you love about this season, just as you're coming in, so we can connect. So glad y'all are here.
Oh, let me turn this down. That was way too loud. I don't think you're on mute yet.
Yes.
We'd also like to mention as you come in to mute yourselves. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
So excited you're joining us. Save the best for last. Our Maternal Learning and Innovation series. So glad y'all are here.
We're gonna probably wait another 30 seconds or so and get started, because I guarantee you there will not be enough time for all of the amazing information that you all are getting ready to get.
It's so great to think. And just one last reminder, you make sure to mute yourself. We didn't mute you upon arrival. And hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us know where you're coming from. I can see that we have folks from across the country, which is really exciting. It's great. Kimberly, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you are here. It is my pleasure to be able to introduce these two masterful trainers. I would like to introduce you all to Camie J. Goldhammer, and Camie is the founder and chair of the Native American Breastfeeding Coalition of Washington. She's also a founding mother and president-elect of the National Association of Professional and Peer Lactation Supporters of Color. And she was the first.
Thank you. Okay, awesome.
Stephanie, oh, thank you. And again, she in 2013, she became Washington State's first Native American International Board lactation consultant. And I would like to also introduce you to Kim Salas, and Kim has been an international board certified lactation consultant for over 10 years. She has experience in peer counseling, clinical, and educational lactation. She has been working inclusive of trials of tribal
Did we lose her?
I think we did.
Okay. That's okay, Dr. Bug. We'll just go ahead and get started. Yeah. I know we definitely don't have a ton of time, so we do want to get started. So thank you for that introduction, Dr. Bug. And
Thank you.
yeah, Kim and I are both really excited to be here. So Kim and I are both going to do just a quick introductions of ourselves in the way we would introduce ourselves in our own communities, and then we will get started with this. So he honey wash day, me takiapi. Actually, hate to wash day. We're in the afternoon, at least where I'm at now. Camie Goldhammer, Makiapiye, Damakota, Sisituan, Mapetuan, Hamacha, Seattle Elwati. So good morning or good afternoon, relatives. My name's Camie Goldhammer. I am Dakota. My tribe is Sisseton Wapatum from South Dakota, and I live in the occupied territory of the Duwamish people, also known as Seattle, Washington. So really grateful to be here, and I'll let Kim introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Hi, good morning, Yate. Kimberly Salas Yanishia Nakaidana Sinajini Bashachin, Ashin Yadana Tachini Dashnele. I am from Navajo Nation, which is the Dene people. I currently live in the territories of the Wayo Tola, Yurok, Karut, and the Hupa tribe. So I'm located in Northern California, which is towards the Oregon border. So I'm here, it's very cold, and do lots of work with Camie, and this is one of the things that we do, and we're really put a lot of hard work into this. So we're really happy to share what we've been doing in the past, probably like going on 4 years now. So
5 years, I think. Like, it's wild. Seems like just yesterday I was calling Kim, asking her if she had snow boots to go to Alaska to teach this breastfeeding training that I wanted to do. So so thank you all for being here. I see a couple of familiar names, so really happy you all have chosen to spend your time with us this afternoon. And thank you to the Maternal Health Learning and Innovation Center for the invitation to present our work. It always, like Kim said, this is real hard work for us, and we're really passionate about it. And we, really do it for the love of our people. And it's always really nice when other people and other communities recognize that and give us a platform to share more about it. So we're really grateful for this opportunity to talk a little bit about what we've been up to. And so we've been asked to present on the work that we're doing at Indigenous Lactation Counselor, previously Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor. We changed the name earlier this year for the most obvious reason is to have a more inclusive name to encompass all of our relatives and how they feed their babies their Indigenous milk medicine. And so we're now known as Indigenous Lactation Counselor and call ourselves and the people that we certify IndigiLCs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our training, the development of our training, how our training is different or unique maybe than other trainings, and why it's specially designed for Native people, and then talk a little bit about our outcomes and what we've been doing, and I think that's about it. So with that, I'm going to get going, and we do have an opportunity for folks to, we kind of made the decision beforehand that if you do have questions, please put them into the chat. I think that Allison is going to be looking at the chat and might chime in if there's a specific question that would be best answered in the moment. Otherwise, we'll save questions at the end as well. So, but we would love, your questions and comments in the chat. So please. So the first thing that we wanted to kind of define is, or come from like a place of defining the term decolonization. I will say, like, the term decolonization has been it is thrown around a lot at this point. There's a lot of different things that are, people will say like decolonizing this, decolonizing that. And it's getting really complicated, or I'm like, is that decolonization? I don't know. But we're really focusing on decolonizing lactation education. So kind of want to like share a little bit about what that means for us. And so I'm going to go just read this quote really quickly. It says, Indigenous decolonization is a process that Indigenous people whose communities were grossly affected by colonial expansion, genocide, and cultural assimilation may go through by reframing with other Indigenous frameworks of thought. In understanding the history of their colonization and rediscovering their ancestral traditions and cultural values while considering the future simultaneously. So that really kind of encompasses what we're doing at Indigenous Lactation Counselor. We, really could spend a lot of time like hours and hours and hours of going through this training and like what we do in it. But one of the key tenets that we really come from is recognizing that breastfeeding or lactation is a cultural practice. It's a traditional practice. And that's kind of like our foundation that we jump off of, that this is about reclaiming a cultural practice. It's not about gaining clinical knowledge. It's not about having, more people with these clinical skills or anything like that. This is actually about giving the information that was taken from our people as a result of colonization and racism and genocide, giving it back to the community and putting it in their hands so that they can serve their people best. And so it really is kind of this very like different way of looking at at lactation education, because that is not kind of the mainstream way of looking at lactation education. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is kind of like the need for this training and where that came from. And quite honestly, it came from my own experience of becoming an IBCLC. As you saw on that first slide, my background is I'm a clinical social worker. So I worked as a therapist for years, really specializing in the impacts of historical and intergenerational trauma on attachment and bonding and parenting practices in the Native community. And then I had my first kid in 2009 and breastfed her. I was the first in several generations to breastfeed, and it was just quite literally a life-changing experience. Several of you may have heard my breastfeeding experience, and I've shared it in different platforms or speaking, different conferences, but it had a huge impact on me. And I really felt strongly that it was a missing piece to a lot of the work that I was doing when it came to attachment and bonding. And so I, was kind of like this armchair lactation consultant. I was the mom that, in the friend group that knew a lot about lactation, that would answer questions, that kind of stuff. And I was really, in my brain, I was making a lot of connections between like historical trauma and lactation and racism and lactation and all of that, and wanting to talk more about it, but was really finding that door being shut in the lactation field because I wasn't a lactation consultant. And so I was interested in lactation clinically, but really wanted to open up a door for myself so that people in lactation would listen to what I had to say. And, it's funny to say, but literally like the day I became certified, I had like multiple emails like, will you speak at this conference? Will you do that? It literally like made the difference, even though there was zero difference in like what I knew or didn't know, prior to that. But, for a lot of folks here, you may know the process to becoming a lactation consultant, but it essentially requires some college education. It requires about 90 hours of lactation specific education, and it requires, for myself, it was 1,000 clinical hours at the time. Kim came up, became a lactation consultant at a time where it was a few more hours were required, and so that's kind of shifted over the years. And for me to become a lactation consultant, I, did my internship. I took my 45-hour course like everyone else does. I went to conferences. I went to La Leche League, La Leche League conferences, Breastfeeding Coalition conferences. I was just collecting all those CERPs to be able to sit the exam. And the thing that was really clear to me is that my mentors, the family, all of the teachers that I had, the people who taught my 45-hour course, who spoke at all the conferences that I had gone to, again, both of my mentors and nearly 100% of the families that my mentors served were all white women. And it was this thing for me where I was really looking at lactation as a cultural practice, as a traditional practice that was removed from, that I didn't have access to as a result of colonization. And here I was literally having to pay white women to get this information back. right? And I know it can sound really harsh when I say it that way. And I wish we had more time to kind of like talk about just unpack that comment too, but we don't. But that was hard for me, right? Like that was just a really hard pill for me to swallow. It was a pill I swallowed so that I could open doors for, my relatives, but that it was difficult. And I really saw, my friend Aquanda Sanford calls it the mammification of lactation, that like Black and Indigenous people are essentially trained to serve white people, right? To serve as mammies. Like we're not actually, taught in mainstream lactation education to serve our own people. And so that's kind of where that need came from. And, I definitely want to acknowledge Rose and Dr. Bug and all of the work they were doing, because they were doing this in the Black community for years before I even, was conceptualizing this too. And so I was doing some work with Dr. Meerwood, Ann Meerwood at what was previously known as Boston University Breastfeeding Center, which became CHAMPS, which is now CHEER, doing some work within the IHS system, and then some hospital work in the Deep South. And she was applying for some funding and just asked me, what do you want to do? She said, Camie, what do you want to do? I'll write it in. And so looking at, my own education, I really was like, I want our own course. I want to create a training for Native people. Sorry, I talk too much and now I have a dry throat. I wanted to create a 45-hour course for Native people and really looking at our rights as Native people of self-determination, self-reliance, and sovereignty, which are things that our tribal leaders literally signed treaties guaranteeing that we have, right? As Native people, we have a right to sovereignty. And so I was like, we can just do this. And Dr. Bug had brought a group of us in partnership with Linda Smith to Atlanta several years ago to do a kind of train the trainer with Linda Smith's 45-hour course. And she was very generous and kind of giving all that training. And I, in the end, couldn't use it because it wasn't super relevant to our community. But what that did is it planted a seed in me, because at that training, she shared with us how they started the IBCLC, right? And these 45-hour courses. And I remember her saying like, yeah, I wrote the first exam or something at my kitchen table or, whatever. And I was just like, wait, you guys made this up? Like, this is all made up, right? Like, it's not like anointed by God, or like, right? Like, I just had no idea that was how it was done. It didn't really occur to me. And I was like, well, if they made it up, like, why can't I make something up, right? Like, we can do this too. And I have a right to do that. My ancestors signed treaties guaranteeing that right. And so that was kind of how this all started happening. So the Indigenous lactation counselor was created. I spent a couple years working on it. So it is Native designed, Native educators. So Kim and I are the instructors and educators, and we're going to talk more about that. And then the other key thing here is that all of our students are Indigenous and they have to self-identify as Indigenous. We have no interest in policing people's indigeneity. So we're not requiring that they be, a certain shade of brown or super Native or have a certain blood quantum or be enrolled in their tribe, like those things aren't important to us. But it is important that they be Indigenous people. And what Kim and I tell people all the time is that our training is not a cultural competency training. It is not a training for people to learn how to serve Native people. This is about giving this information, this traditional knowledge back to the community, which is where it belongs. And so that's that. And so I'm going to hand it over to Kim, who is going to share a little bit about what we do in the Indigenous lactation counselor training that might be different or unique to our training. Because, I mean, as cliche as it is, like breastfeeding is breastfeeding, lactation is lactation, you know, we're all the same under our skin. Yes, right? Like those are all true. So clinically, our training is not vastly different than any other 45-hour course. But there are things that we do in our training and that are important to us that are unique to doing a breastfeeding training or a lactation training with Native people. And so I'm going to pass it on to Kim, and I'll kind of jump in here and there too. Yeah, so.
Okay, so one of the things that we find very important is that we make sure that the communities are going to invite Camie and I to come to the communities that they feel is important. So we don't say like you have to have breastfeeding because it's important. We all know it's important. However, the community that want us to come, they would take the initiative to invite us because they're prioritizing breastfeeding. And if they're prioritizing breastfeeding and the well-being of our communities, they're going to take that first step and that initiative to make sure that it's important and that they're going to make sure that the families get what they need when it comes to sharing that knowledge in a more broader perspective when it comes to Indigenous perspectives. But we don't market ourselves. We don't say, hey, invite us. It's important that they want us there, and it's going to be very intentional for that community to say breastfeeding is important. And here we are going to have Indigenous instructors to come and share that knowledge. And again, this knowledge is not ours. We don't own it. It's for the community. It's for our Native people to have this, because this is what was inherited, their right. This is their right to know, and this is their cultural practice to have this knowledge and to provide it for their community, but they're for future generations. And so we really emphasize that we don't go market, and that we are going to be invited by people that want us to come.
Yeah. And the only thing I want to add to that too is that, like, as you know, even though Kim and I are both Native, like, we have to be really careful about how we go into communities and coming into places in a good way. And so, you know, there's a long history of, you know, uninvited guests in Native communities causing a lot of harm. And that's just not outsiders, right? That's Native people doing that too. And so we, when we go into communities, we want to make sure we have that invitation. And that's just really important to us. So, you know, I don't want to say never say never, but I don't see us ever kind of saying like, okay, you know, Blackfeet, we're coming to you, you know, we're doing a training, like, you know, that kind of thing, right? Like, we would not want to do that. Who knows? I mean, yeah, watch someday. Yeah.
And we're still guests too. So yes. Even if Cam and I are both Native from, you know, our tribes, we are not going to come there and pose our own beliefs and our own agenda. We're going to go there with a very good intention to have the community kind of run its course. And by that, an invitation by them is important for the first step of that, decolonizing that mindset of that we're not going to go and say, hey, you need to have a say. So yeah. For sure. The other part of centering our course is that we are in Indian time. So this is very common when we are among our Native people, say like, you're on Indian time. I know we're not gonna be on time. Cam and I share that all the time with, you know, even just getting on this call sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
And other communities may know this as like color people time or island time, yeah. Or, you know, it's just kind of like, it's not that linear.
Yes, no, it is not. So why we do this is because we, you know, what we teach is going to be based on more, I like to say, spiritual time. What information is going to be given to us is going to be what it's meant to be for that time. And anything can happen during this time. I know there's times where we thought we were going to start on time and we had a medicine person come in, then we had another person come in and talk about how important breastfeeding is in a storytelling time when it came with an elder. So we really make sure that time is going to be open to those unexpected things. And so we don't have like a set agenda. And I think that really kind of breaks down people to feel like, okay, I'm not going to be stressed out about time. I'm going to be okay coming when I need to come. And this is very important when it comes to like our mothers that are having other younger children. Maybe something happened I know we have this many times happen in a course where there was an emergency, or we even actually built a wigwam with the community. And that was really cool. We didn't know that we were going to do that, but it was a very important time to have that teaching moment, that teaching opportunity, because we won't get that time back. So it's more like living in the moment too, and to encompass all the gifts that are given from the ancestors. And so we really honor that in time. It doesn't mean like we're gonna like be super late, but also we want to make sure though that we're gonna be ready when everyone's ready too. Like we kind of wait for people to come, right?
Yeah. I just want to share a little bit about the wigwam, experience, because that was something there. We have a couple of times that this flexibility in our time is really stood out as like, this is so the right decision. And that was, we had a student in our class who was at term. She was due any day with her baby. She was planning a home birth. Her baby was going to be the first baby born at home on tribal lands in over 100 years, right? Like this is huge. And she didn't come to training like on Thursday morning. And one of the people in the training was like, she's in labor, and the wigwam, which is their lodge, right, which is where she was going to be delivering the baby, she's like, the wigwam isn't finished, and a few of us are going to go help her put it together for the birth. And we were like, let's all go, like we're all let's all go do it. And so the whole, we all got in a car and drove over to their property and built that wigwam, and it was incredible. And we took probably a couple hours out of the day to do it. But like, you can't tell me that was not the most valuable thing we did that day, and it was so important. And yes, because of it, we didn't talk about prolactin, or we didn't talk, like there was something that we didn't do, but that experience was so important, and for everyone there to take part in that and have that baby be born in a completed wigwam Friday morning, is just like, so it was so beautiful. And so that's what we mean. We we just let things go. And overall everyone gets what they need. So yeah.
The other important part about our training too is about how important representation matters. And Camie mentioned about her experience with the lactation courses she took that was all clinical, but and I'm sure this happens a lot too in other courses, is a lot of the imagery didn't speak to us, right? A lot of the stories or the pictures did not tell me I look like them. So when it comes to imagery and artists, we make sure that we are going to show this in our course, and what people may look like that we're going to be working with within our communities. So these are just some of the pictures that we have in our course. And again, if a student is going to be coming in and they've never taken this type of course, they're going to see themselves in these pictures, and that's really important to feel like it's going to feel validated. It's going to feel like they look like me. I know it really speaks to me when I see these images when I'm traveling with Camie, and we've experienced, going to other communities that, that we're with our people, and it just makes us feel very validated. So this is just kind of telling that this is our birthright. So for our course, we don't have like a requirement for education. So there's no minimum requirement for people to come in. We've had many questions asked as, do I have to have a college education? Do I have to have these other courses behind it? And the answer is no. It's really important to know that this is not something that we find is important, but just to come who they are and how they receive the message is going to be really important when it comes to education. The course is going to be free to participants. So anyone that is in the community that identifies as Indigenous is free to them. So we really want to emphasize that it is offered at no cost for students.
Right. Do you want me to jump in, Kim?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, we talked about alternate or convolution. All right. Definitely relevant to any role in the community. This kind of goes along with like what Kim was saying with the, no minimum educational requirement. We have a lot of people that, just like they just like breastfeeding or they like lactation and they want to come and they don't know that if they're allowed to, and they'll reach out to us and we're like, yes, like it's for anybody to come and gain this knowledge. And we have taught a huge variety of people, from like doctors, nurses, social workers, home visitors, doulas, and aunties and teen moms and and people that just want to serve their cousins and other people who want to become IBCLCs. Like there's just a huge range of what people do with this, and that's kind of the beauty of this training, is just letting people, giving them the information, and then they run with it, and it's awesome to see. The other one is that we welcome kids. So, and I really want to be clear that it's kids. Kids are welcome, not just babes in arms, right? Not just like little ones, which is pretty typical in most other lactation trainings. And this is like, I don't want to like glorify this and make it sound like it's just incredible, because it is hard. Like it's hard as instructors. There have been trainings that we have been outnumbered by children and, like adults to kids in this space. There have been trainings where Kim's teaching and I'm on the floor playing with like 4 1-year-olds and, just like trying to, or we're holding babies while parents are doing hands-on activities and, like whatever we can. But for us, we really see, again, if we look at lactation as a cultural practice, as a traditional practice, we learn it by being immersed in it, and we would have never traditionally prevented kids from being in these spaces, right? Where moms are, where life givers are, where birthing people are, that's where kids are traditionally. They would have never been separated from us for a very, very long time. And so we welcome them in this space. And the cool thing about it is that the parents all stay. They come and they stay, they get there, they attend the whole day, they pay attention as best as they can, and they complete the training. They don't call and say like, I can't come because I don't have childcare for today, right? Like you can come, that's all good. And so we, and again, it's still challenging, and we always get feedback on surveys like, this was really hard with the kids, or this, whatever. And it's just like, yeah, but that's part of decolonizing our educational spaces, is welcoming kids back in them. And that's something that we as Native people have to do for ourselves, right? And decolonizing ourselves and how we see education.
I just want to add something to that real quick, Camie, is that when we talk about the children, we want to make sure that education is not a barrier to the mothers, right? Because a lot of courses, again, you can't have children, right? Just you can still mother and learn. And then the other piece is just that at the end of the course, everyone's an auntie, right? Everyone's taking care of everybody, and it's just great. That's what community people do, and that's decolonizing the mindset of inviting children back to the space. So when it comes to ceremony and culture, we like to make sure that we're honoring our host. So that means the host is going to really kind of set the tone of what the community is about and how they're going to acknowledge the things that they would normally do in a setting of like, not a classroom, but a gathering. So they would have their own teachings, they would have their own way of food that they want to bring. So we make sure we honor that community. And again, we don't bring our own ideologies or belief systems into like our culture, into their space. We come in very very intentional with good medicine, good open heart that they're going to do what they need to do, and we're just there to teach, right? And again, just starting that process in a good way is really important. We want to make sure that the intention is a very positive experience. We start with sometimes a blessing if that happens. Whatever community that calls for what they feel they need to do to start off the course. And so the gathering of people is really important. So we might want to make sure that we talk about the things that they want to talk about, the songs they want to sing, the food they want to bring in. And that's really up to the host. And that's how we honor the community of not imposing our own views, our own cultural practices onto them, even though we're Native people. Again, we're still guests, right?
Yep. And super different. So
Yep.
cool. You want me to do this one?
Sure.
I can do tests. So the other one is that we do not have a test. And there's not a lot of not all 45-hour courses have tests, but a lot of them do. And we have intentionally chosen not to do a test. And the reason is written right here is that, we know that standardized tests have been shown to produce invalid results when given to Native test takers. And then results usually produce lower or less desirable scores for Native test takers. We truly believe that a test is not a proper assessment of the information that we know. And so we don't do it. It doesn't make sense. What we do is we spend a time on information that is important. So while another training, 45-hour training, might be trying to cram in as much information as possible, right? In that 45 hours, our focus is quality time on quality content that is relevant to the information that community needs. So we could spend an hour talking about the 50 different hormones in lactation and things like that, but instead we spend a lot of time talking about oxytocin and prolactin because those are the two hormones that matter, right? Like those are really the primary ones that matter. So why waste time talking about all these other things that really doesn't matter to for a peer counselor role? What we want, we're training counselors. We want them to work with families to have the knowledge they need to. So we really focus on that quality time on quality content versus like quantity, right? Like that's not our goal. We also find that test anxiety is a barrier to education, and that if a person is anxious about passing a test, feels too much pressure to pass a test, that they will not be in a position to learn as openly as when they can just sit there and be themselves. And we had this on, I remember our second training ever. We were in Bemidji, Minnesota, and one of our students at the very beginning of the day, we're doing intros and things like that, asking questions, and she was literally pacing in the back of the course. Like she was like nervous, right? Like just pacing. And then she just was like, is there going to be a test at the end of this? And it was like, yeah, we're like, no. And then she could like sit down and chillax for a minute, so that was something that we won't do and we won't ever do. So yeah. Okay.
Okay. So one of the things that we definitely do is hands-on activities, because as Native people or anyone that wants to learn from me, I'm a big learner when it comes to like hands-on. So we definitely spend some time with our students showing latch and positioning, different techniques of assisting mothers with or parents with breastfeeding. We also do a lot of counseling when it comes to learning how to talk to families, but we also do this really cute sewing boob button so that people can do things with their hands. And a lot of times, the students will say, just working that with my hand, even though I'm doing things concentrating on my boob button, I'm actually learning all the important things I need to know about what we're talking about. Because some of the things get a little dry, like, oh, we had to talk about this again. But I can say that the hands-on, like the blue buttons, these are medicine pouches that have our medicines like sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco. And so they just get really, really creative making these amazing buttons so they can wear them. And
yeah. And we introduced this project right after Kim does how milk is made, so like anatomy, right? And right before I do infant oral anatomy, which is definitely like the hardest. I mean, it always ends up being fun, and I always say it's like the lamest session, but people always like it. But I think they like it because they get to be working on something. But it's just a nice way for them to be busy with their hands and reclaiming a practice. A lot of people, have never done beadwork before, they've never sewed before, and so it's really fun for them to kind of reclaim that traditional practice too and learn how to do it. So yeah.
Camie taught me how to sew. So
Yeah. Kim's become quite the sewer, quite the crafty one. Yeah, these are just some more pictures of hands-on, doing. I show like, we always have a training where someone has a baby and they'll be like, I think my baby's tongue-tied. All right, let's check it out, right? Like everyone gather around. Here's what I'm looking for. Let's do an infant oral exam. We're going to show that, so they see it. This kind of middle picture over on the left is hand expression. So anytime we have someone, almost always have someone lactating in the training. We've only had maybe 2 where we didn't have anybody lactating, but teaching hand expression in the space. So yeah, it's super fun.
yeah.
I can kind of go over this because I know I'm like, it's already 12:45, Kim. All right, so content, we have some really specific content that we cover in our training. Our first entire day is on historical and unresolved grief. We don't even get into clinical lactation until usually midway through day 2. We really believe that kind of understanding and acknowledging that historical context of circling up, being in community, sharing your own experiences, your own grief of lactation, of mothering, of how you were mothered, how historical trauma has impacted you and your family and your community. We have to talk about those things so you can be in a better place to serve, right? So that's a big part of our day 1. And that would definitely not happen in any other lactation training at all, but it's super important and always on evals, like people's favorite, kind of favorite parts of the training too. When we talk about formula feeding, when we're able to talk about formula feeding, that's a presentation sometimes we don't get to, depending on, that whole Indian time thing, but we talk about water rights. We can't separate those two things. We can't talk about formula feeding and not talk about Flint. We can't talk about formula feeding and not talk about the fact that 40% of people on the Navajo Indian Reservation don't have running water to their homes. We can't talk about formula feeding and not acknowledge that almost 15% of Native homes don't have electricity to heat up water, or whatever that is. Like, we have to talk about those kinds of things there. So we talk about traditional medicine, substance misuse, which I hope is integrated into a lot of trainings, but we do spend a fair amount of time when it comes to that. Of course, mental health, child welfare, we do what we can there. And then kind of the last thing that I want to say here is, something that we always get asked at the end of our training, and this is definitely a unique perspective on lactation and can be controversial maybe in like a mainstream lactation community, but we always get asked, what can we do with this training? Like, what's our scope, right? What can we do? And this is where we really have to kind of decolonize lactation and look at it, is that as Native people, we have always been able to help people breastfeed, right? Or chest feed. women have been helping women do this since the beginning of time. It traditionally fell on the aunties, on the grandmas to do this work. And you do not need to have letters after your name to provide lactation support to people. And so we feel really strongly about that and making sure that our students feel empowered to help people in their community. Kim and I are only about two of just over 20 now. I think we had our 21st certificate, IBCLC, be certified, got her notice yesterday, or the day before. So there's very few of us that are IBCLCs in the Native community. And there's, 4 million Native people in the United States covering, 600, almost 600 tribes. Like for us to say just an IBCLC can serve them or do certain things is, irresponsible at best, right? It's just really hard. So, in our communities, traditionally, it is our community who certifies us. That is who determines our scope. If you're good at what you do, your community will support you. If you don't do a good job, if you give bad advice, very quickly your community will stop supporting you in that way, right? They'll stop referring out. And so we really find that by putting the power back in the community to determine someone's scope, and for, again, right now this works because in most states in the country, lactation is not a licensed profession, so it's not regulated, right? This is something that will change or continues to change depending on state licensure bills and whatnot. But for right now, and definitely on Indian reservations, because we're sovereign nations, we can help people with lactation regardless of who we are. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. And so, yeah, that's something there. I'm just going to kind of go through these pictures. These are students. Kim and I started teaching in 2017, September of 2017. This was our first training in Barrow, Alaska. It's the land of the Inupiaq people on the Arctic slope. It's the Arctic Ocean right behind us. It's the most northern town in the United States. And so this is us there, our first training. Our second year was 2018. We did 2 trainings, so we doubled the number of trainings we did in our second year. Year 3, we did 6 trainings. Year 3 was really special for us too, because we did our first urban training in Seattle, and we were invited to Hawaii to do a training there with our Native Hawaiian relatives. And so in Hawaii, we trained just about 40 Native Hawaiian IndiGLCs. So there was one other person there that was Native American that lived in Hawaii. But other than that, everyone was Native Hawaiian. It was super special. I mean, just like such a special place for us. And so 2019 was definitely like really, really cool for us. 2020, we had one. Obviously, COVID hit. This training was in February of 2020. We had like 6 trainings scheduled for 2020, 6 or 8. And February was the only one that we can do, and then canceled the rest of them. So that is why 2021 was bonkers. And so we had 8 trainings in 2021, including our first and only virtual training. We'll never do it again, so don't ask. We're never doing that again. Our training is meant to be in person, and we were really forced into that situation. We're not going to do it. It was not awesome.
No.
So yeah, we didn't love it. But that was 2021. And then 2022, we did 9 trainings. We did have 2 trainings fall through in 2022. Otherwise we were going to be at 11, which we were really excited to do, but it was a lot. We did almost all of these trainings this summer. A majority of them were done in the summer. So it was a really busy year. We did several in Michigan. We did a Detroit training and another urban training. We were invited back to the Seneca Nation to do a second training, which was really special. Getting that second invite is, really means a lot to us. And then this picture in the middle bottom, I want to point out, was in Arkansas, and we were invited to do a training there with the Marshallese community. Arkansas has the largest Marshallese community outside of the Marshall Islands. It was incredible, life-changing, experience for Kim and I. All of our trainings are special, but there's just some trainings that really touch us in a special way. And Arkansas was one of them. Those women were awesome and really, really special to us.
Yeah.
I know we only have a few minutes left, but we just have a couple of quotes, about the training. I just really want to kind of point out a couple of them, being able to ask questions and not feel embarrassed. This is something we hear a lot. We know that Native people in mainstream educational settings do not feel confident asking questions. They're embarrassed. They think they're not smart. A lot of times our brains work a little on a different timeline than other people. Were really taught to sit back, listen, reflect before we ask anything. And at that point in a mainstream educational setting, they're moved on, and so then you just don't say anything.
Yeah.
The course is still in depth, right? Clinically, it's really strong. And we're really proud of that. Kim and I are both really solid lactation consultants with, over 2 decades of combined experience as lactation consultants. And so we really try and give as much quality clinical education as well. Also just how meaningful it is, right? You see this third quote, it was the most empowering experience of their life. Like, it's a lactation training, this means a lot for a lot of people. They've never been in an all Native space. They've never been in this, a space that's really like led by matriarchs and where they can be their authentic selves. And it's just, it's special.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
yeah. And so I will just kind of bust through these. So everything, just really, really good feedback. Someday we'll research it and publish it and put it in a paper. And then just really quickly, Kim, do you want to go over this? And then we can maybe just do questions.
Yeah. So outcomes, we've had over 472 Indigenous LCs certified through our course. That's important because, representation matters, and they can work within their communities to serve their people. And their community certifies what they do and how they do it. Coalition building, this is pretty significant because we've had several of our groups that come together that created really big things and became a coalition for their communities and do a really amazing work. They're out there not only just in the field, but also sharing that knowledge in different conferences in their space. So we're really happy to see that really come to fruition with their work. Resolutions and proclamations. So we've had a couple of Indigenous LCs pass travel resolutions supporting their worksite lactation laws. So that's really important to feel like they empowering themselves, but to do the betterment of their communities, to really prioritize that lactation is important when it comes to working mothers. And then last, a Noonie project was a pretty big project. This was one of our Indigenous LCs from Michigan. She spearheaded this project called the Noonie Project, Angie Sanchez, and she got a really big, pretty significant grant of $400,000 in funding to support this work in her communities. And so that was something that we really did in the summer. Camie and I were in Michigan like 6-7 times. I felt like we were going to Michigan every other week, but it was pretty special. And so a lot of things came out of that project too. And so in the future, I'm sure she's going to bring all that information together and share it.
Yeah. So for us, where are we going next? We're hitting the road in February. We are completely booked for 2023. We've been booked for several months now for 2023, which is wild to think about, including 3 trainings in Canada. So we're going international. We've had a couple Canadians that come to our trainings in the US, but we've never done one in Canada. And so we're going to 3 First Nations communities in Canada. Our first one is in February. We're going to be in Kamloops in BC. So we're so grateful to be able to do that. Really excited to be able to bring the training to Canada, and really honored to be invited. And so with that, we will just say thank you. So thank you all so much. We might have a few minutes for questions, but we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
This was an amazing presentation, and I have been getting a bunch of questions chatted to me privately. So
Cool.
Are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Some of these have been answered in your presentation. I'm going to answer or ask them nonetheless because I think they're common questions. When are these scheduled? When can we attend? How can we get you to schedule them with us? What are the costs? How do you fund this? That's one bundle of questions for you.
Cool. Yeah, so the way that we do this is the way, as we said, we need an invite. So if someone wants us to come, reach out to us. We had our email up. We can, maybe send that out to her. I can put it in the chat. But we write that now at gmail.com. So people can reach out to us, and we basically set up a call. Part of being invited in a community saying breastfeeding is important to us is that they have the funding to bring us. So we do, ask that our host community pay for the training, and then everything's included in that, like in that amount. And we would talk about that. It feels weird to kind of talk about in a big space like this, but feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about it, the cost. But that's kind of how it works. And then we just work with you to schedule it, and go from there. So the host community is really responsible for the recruitment of the students. We don't do any of that. We're happy to post it on social media and things like that, but we're really like, it's your training. You do what you want with it, like run with it. So that's about it. It's pretty straightforward. We are booked for 2023. If something were to fall through, and I know Sisseton's on here, and so I will bend over backwards. Kim already knows that we'll do anything to go to Sisseton. So I'm going to make, and they've already reached out to, so we're working on that. But our home, for Navajo Nation, our home communities, we're going to do what we can, to make it happen. But otherwise, we are scheduling for 2024. This year was hard for us. I got to say it's a lot to travel and be gone for, we're gone for a week with every training. We have a travel day on each end. We're away from our families. And so we just are trying to be really conscious because we don't want to burn out. We want to keep doing this for as long as possible until we can get more people trained to, people always ask us what about train the trainers? What about that? We're just not quite there yet. Kim and I are still, there's just a lot before we can get there, but we do want to do that someday. Yeah. And so, but for now, we're trying to create a schedule that works for us. We both have day jobs. We have other work that we do. So, yeah.
Another bank of questions. One of them is, how can folks who don't identify as Indigenous, allies and other supporters, how can we support you?
Yeah, I would say, and Kim, feel free to chime in too. I think, we do get asked about education. We do have a 3-day course that is open to people that work in Native communities. We don't do it often because we're so busy with the 5-day, and that's our priority is training Native people. And so we did do 2 3-day courses this year though, right, Kim? Yeah, we did 2.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
We did Seneca and
Imagery.
and Bemidji. Yeah. So it was, and they're great, and that's open to anyone. It still centers Native people, but it's open to anybody to attend. So that's an option. Feel free to reach out to us. The other thing that I'll say, and I don't know for people that ask that question, but what we find is that a lot of people that are higher up or admin in Native communities are non-Native. And like, how do I say this? We have had trainings, and we had one training in 2023 that we believe ended up not being booked, even though it was booked, because we said the admin couldn't come. Right. And they wanted to come, right? They wanted to come to the training. We said no. And so they canceled the entire training for the entire community. Right. It's devastating. Like, I mean, Kim was with me when it happened. Like, I'm so angry about it, because that's not how you ally, right? Like, if you're in that position, in an admin position, a higher up position, like, do what you can to support the community in getting this information. Work yourself out of a job, like, train people to do, give them the training they need to be able to do it. And that's, something that I would say, like, do what you can. And we've had some incredible examples of that. I mean, I think of, like, Hawaii was one, that it was Breastfeeding Hawaii that paid for the entire training, and not a single person from Breastfeeding Hawaii could come to it. I mean, we've had just these examples of people really stepping up, really being incredible allies, using their power where they can to make this available to the community, which is where it belongs.
And Arkansas was a huge part of that too.
Oh, Arkansas was amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, they went above and beyond. They closed down the building. They were like, no white people allowed in the building. We were like, what? Like, like, everybody worked from home for the whole week.
Yeah.
It was the public health department.
It was bizarre. We're like, what?
Yeah, why is this building so empty? And they had, I mean, it was a health department, and they had everybody who wasn't attending the training work from home for the whole week. We did not ask for that, but I will tell you, like, those women loved it. They loved being able to just, like, go to the bathroom and not be snagged by someone and asked a question, or, like, whatever. And so we've really seen different communities really step up, or allies step up. So that's one way, and just helping, there's a lot of small community-based coalitions that they don't have the funding, they don't have the infrastructure to be able to bring us. And so, work with them. Yep. Add some money in, like, help out where you can, be a fiscal sponsor, do different things would be really helpful. Yeah. And then just ask the communities that you're near, right? Or ask your employees, like, what you can do.
Thank you. For anyone who's on a strict deadline, please note that we are recording this. We'll post the recording on the Maternal Health Learning and Innovation Center website, which I dropped in the chat, along with an evaluation, because we are grant funded and we need to evaluate. There's one more question that was sent to me that I wanted to ask you, which is, do you welcome Indigenous people from Central and South America?
We do.
We do.
So
yeah.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah. So in the very beginning, it's funny because Cam and I had this, this is what traveling has done to us and me too, has kind of broadened my perspective. What is native, right? But it's more like Indigenous people. What is that? And there's so many different people that identify as Indigenous. So, and that has come up a lot. And so we do welcome other people to come into that space. However, when we talk about the historical trauma, it's mainly from our history, right?
We center the Native American experience in our training, and
we allow other people to share that if they choose to, and it's kind of cool because they can relate to a lot of the things that we talk about when it comes to, like, white supremacy, genocide, all those things they'll share, and we all get to kind of learn what they've been through too, for their people. And so we do invite them to come in, but most of the focus is on the history that kind of sets that foundation. But again, other, and then we haven't had a lot come, but there's some that have attended, right, Camie?
Say that again.
We didn't have a lot of other people, other groups, just, one or two here and there. not a
Yeah.
whole lot, but it was a
Yeah,
learning
we've definitely,
experience.
yeah, like Kim said, it was a learning experience. When I was like writing the training, I'm like, oh, Indigenous, that's just us,
Yeah.
and then very quick, right? That's like our
Yeah.
own naivete and how we as Native people like invisibilize other Native people.
Yeah.
And, so we've worked on that. And I will say we cannot wait for someone who is from Mexico, South America, Indigenous, to create their own training that they can do that's specific. And until that time, we will welcome Indigenous people into our training. But we do, same with Hawaii. We're like, invite us back for one more and then create your own. Like we want to do one more, like just one more trip to Hawaii, please. But
Yeah.
then, do your own, but we recognize that'll take time, but we do hope that someone will do that someday for our Indigenous relatives in Mexico and South America, for sure.
So I have one last burning question. If I'm going to jump in real quick, I know we're over time, but we are. So, from our perspective, for those of us that create training programs and bundles and all of these things that we do, I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in what you've shared that we can really just hold. But, how do we do this better from the start? At least it's starting with something that's going to be easier for people to transform, right? We'll never have the same thing that works for everyone. But I'm just curious if you could wave a wand and change how we were functioning like tomorrow. Do you have any suggestions or starting points?
I'm not totally sure I understand. Like for you, like as the maternal coalition, or
so a lot of us create well, here's the postpartum care bundle, or here's the managing high blood pressure bundle, or here's something, here's how to build. I don't know. There's so many things that we try to do to provide and uplift and build skills and supports. And I'm just thinking, how do we make it easier for these to be transformed, or how do we do that better?
Yeah.
I guess I can kind of use an example for the WIC program. I do contract work for the WIC, and when I sat with the director or the lead, the manager for the WIC program, she's also Native, and she has other, WIC comes from like a federal, umbrella. And so they want to kind of change the way they do things when it came to decolonizing WIC, right? And how do we do that? And it's kind of hard because you kind of have to have the knowledge and the wisdom how to encompass that work into what you're doing without, I guess, breaking the rules or whatever. It's gonna be hard for clinical work, right? But usually, if we are talking about some of the things they have to talk about in a WIC appointment, how do we change the language in that? How do we say certain things to have that client understand this comes from this perspective when it comes to Native people? And that's just an example. It's going to be hard for some of the things that you guys may talk about in a clinical perspective, but it's really about who's doing the work and who you ask, and what is that, where does that foundation is going to come from. And it takes a lot of time. It's not something that just happens. It takes people to understand. For me and Camie, that's why we don't have a lot of instructors yet. We thought we are going to have instructors to teach this course, by year 3, and that's not going to happen because it takes a lot of experience and a lot of care in what you do and the work that you do. So it's hard to transform that, and it's going to be a gradual turn. But I mean, that's kind of the best I can give as far as an example, because again, the WIC people are very much set on a mindset of just sticking to the agenda, sticking to what they're supposed to say. And that's not how it works when it comes to sharing knowledge with families. You want to come from a place that is going to be not a
like a principle, like something that will stick to them to keep breastfeeding, or why is it important? Because once you connect with them on that level, it's more meaningful and they get it. And that's kind of how I'm kind of got contracted into WIC to how to do that. And it's hard. You have to go back to you again, say, okay, why are we doing this? What is this work meant to be like? And in the transforming part is like, again, I think Cam and I work from a place where we came from a lot of different experiences, and her and I are both different, but when we come together, we work in different ways to kind of bring that connection to our communities. And how do they do that? It's just amazing what they can do with that work. And we're instruments, we're helping to move that, but we're not telling them how to do it. It's just more of a intuition and things that you have to work through, but the transform is going to take time. But I know what you're saying, Sarah. It's hard for me to kind of put it in words, but
but you did though, right? It's a process, it's a patience, and it's a constant like stepping back, leaning in. I think that's wonderful, and I hope we'll be able to continue to journey with you for a long time to come. I'm gonna look to Dr. Bug if you want to just close us out. I know people are probably late for
yeah, and I'm just really so happy so many people stayed. Thank you so much, because that doesn't happen a lot, of course, when we go over. So this was very, very good. And I see someone just has their hand up, but I just wanted to say, as she was talking about that, I was just thinking about everybody's on the equity train. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody is buying into it, but it comes to inclusion. After you get us there, then it's like, okay, we got you. We can check that box, but we're not really feeling included. And that's when we have to venture off and do our own thing. Like we've always said about the Rose Community Transformer, we really want to eventually be able to sort of melt it into what everybody else is doing. But, we're still so far away from that. We have to keep this, kind of bundled up to teach our history and our culture. But thank you all so much for being here. And you all will definitely be hearing more from Camie and Kim with IMLIC over the next couple of years too. They got those little trainings going on, but they gonna have some space for IMLIC also.
Yeah. And I'm like, thank you so much, Dr. Bug. I appreciate it, and everyone. But I do see Ashley raise their hand, and Ashley is one of our newest native IBCLC, just got certified. So I will see what she has to say, because I'm like, let's call on her.
I really just wanted to express my gratitude and really just thank you guys for everything that you guys have done. Sorry, I'm like emotional over this. I just got my results this week. But really, this is a program that it does work, and it is life-changing for a lot of people. And I think that, when we're looking at it from an outside perspective, we're not always, we attend these trainings, we're not always understanding that these really are life-changing things for certain people, and especially for Indigenous people, and being in that community, having that support, all of that, it really does make a huge difference. And I really just cannot give you guys enough gratitude for everything.
Oh, well, we love you, Ashley, and we're so proud of you.
I know, I'm proud of you.
Congratulations, Ashley.
Congratulations. We're so happy.
It wouldn't be an
Goodbye.
IBC talk without tears. So
Look at you. Look at y'all. Look at all y'all. Look at you. Look, that's why I'm
Oh my
leaving.
gosh.
we do
everyone.
colonize crying all the time.
Yes.
Colonize crying.
I love that. I'm a crier. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all. Till Shaw,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.